Gotham Knights was a highly anticipated title for fans of superhero games that have been desperately wanting a full-fledged AAA open-world game in this genre with co-op options, as a major selling point of the game was that it was entirely playable with two-player co-op. But the game has been received extremely poorly, with low review scores and lots of talk surrounding its measly 30 frames per second frame rate on consoles, and this is in a game that is exclusive to newer platforms, the Xbox Series S and X, as well as the PlayStation 5. It's not even supported on Xbox One and PS4. But there are some people, and for some of you this may be hard to understand how desperate these people are, but there are some who are so thirsty for a game like this, something new set in the Batman universe, again with those co-op options, that they're wondering if they may be able to look past all this and still enjoy the game. If they can squint at a game and it sort of looks like the Arkham games, they may still be in. Yeah, they're that big of fanboys. And I know this because that's me. I'm Arkham fanboys. So for those of you like me, I know you've been asking yourself, is the game really that bad? I've played through it myself, did most of the side content and all, and will say I did manage to have some fun with it. Stress on the word some. So that's what I want to talk about today. The game actually starts off really strong. I would even go as far to say it peaks about immediately as it begins with this slow-moving shot of the Batmobile. Nice design, thing looks great. Oh, shit! Ooh, dude, that looks really bad. Yeah, you get this really badass cutscene at the beginning with Batman fighting Ra's al Ghul in the Batcave. You see Batman get seriously jacked up in it. I love whenever these games have the balls to go a little bit further with the brutal level of violence. Batman decides to sacrifice himself and blow the whole thing up, taking down Ra's and himself. Then enters the JV squad, the Bat Fam. Robin, Batgirl, Nightwing, and one of my favorite DC characters, Deadpool, come onto the scene to find Bruce's body. They do not make it vague or anything, which is what I thought may be happening initially, because during the fight, we just see the Batcave get demolished. You don't really see what happened, so I thought maybe it'd be a bit ambiguous what happened to Bruce Wayne, but no. They find his body and everything. Batman is 100% dead as a doornail right at the outset of this game. And so, his band of protégés decide to team up and find out how all this happened, what was Batman investigating at the time, and how did the world's greatest detective manage to get taken out like this. Now, getting into the game itself, as I stated at the top, the main thing it's getting hate about online is the visuals, so let's get into that quickly. The game is locked, once more, on consoles at 30 frames per second. There is no 60 FPS performance mode or anything like that. Now, just at face value, that's bad. Players are getting fairly accustomed to 60 FPS options these days. I think we're at least at the point now where everyone wants 60, at least as an option. I think the 30 frames per second makes Bloodborne better because it's more cinematic. Yeah, I think all those people went extinct, hopefully at least. And especially when this is a current-gen only game. There is no PS4 or Xbox One option. So they were allowed to take full advantage of this new hardware. And on top of that, it also brings the current gen price tag. So this game is $70 on those platforms. I think it's still $60 on PC. But all this still isn't my main problem here. I could stomach a stable 30 frames per second and still fully enjoy this game. But it struggles to even hit that. When you're exploring the open world, especially zipping around on the Batcycle, fighting a lot of enemies with lots of effects on screen, you get major hits to that already low frame rate. I remember this one Mr. Freeze fight and shit was exploding everywhere. He had these ice beams circling around that you had to dodge. And yeah, it was tough to play because I could barely even follow what was happening. Sticking with the visuals, the design of the world feels very generic. One of the great things about Gotham and other DC cities is that they're not real. So you can go crazy in how you design them. Gotham obviously tends to be much more gothic, a bit creepy. things always seem to take place at night in these dirty, steam-filled streets and alleyways that are littered with crime. I always like to think of Gotham as a bit nicer version of Chicago. And the design of Gotham in this game, it just feels so bland. There are some buildings that stand out. There are certainly some key important ones to the game that, they must have spent a bit more time on. But overall, when you're looking out at the city, just not very memorable. I mean, look at this compared to Gotham City in Arkham Knight, which came out all the way back in 2015. Which, with that said, I do want to say something for the hardcore defenders of this game, of Gotham Knights, because their main defense, at least what I've seen online, has basically been, oh, this is a whole separate franchise. It has nothing to do with the Arkham games, so you shouldn't even be comparing them. Yeah, you're totally right. I mean, this is just an open-world superhero game where you play as characters highly trained in combat and stealth techniques, armed with state-of-the-art advanced gadgets to conduct investigations and fight crime. Oh, and it's, as I said, set in the fictional city of Gotham that has a max security prison/mental facility called Arkham Asylum, where some of the game takes place. Yeah, you guys are right. It makes no sense to be comparing this game to the Arkham games. But if it's okay with you, we're still going to do it anyway, so sorry. Beyond that, in terms of the visuals, I do want to mention that the graphical quality, when the game, again, isn't stuttering, is still pretty high. Like, the textures in that, I think, are good. It's just that these things weren't used to make things great in terms of the overall design. There are some interiors, I will say, that are more interesting that I'll get into a bit later. The designs of the characters, I think, are solid. Nothing too mind-blowing, especially like in terms of the villains. Again, I think this is something you can really go crazy and create some awesome looks for them, but didn't seem to go too hard. I will say I did like I don't want to be offensive, the women of size in this game.
Who is that? Oh my God!
Tonight is looking up.
I'm sorry!
Yeah, I thought the female heavies were actually, it's something that just felt very comic booky. Those did give me a bit of a chuckle, especially when you first run into them. I will say, though, I very much appreciate the variety of costume designs for the playable characters, which I'll also get more into that when we talk a bit about all the gearing in that. And so that mostly covers my thoughts on the visuals, which has been, as I said, most people's focus when it comes to this game. Now let's talk about what I care about the most and where my big problems lie. Yes, if you follow my channel, you know I'm one of those crazy out there gamers who cares the most about gameplay in my video games. And my God, there is a huge problem with that here. The combat in this game is so slow and sluggish. Just isn't very fun to engage with. There are some cool moves, animations in that, but the overall feel of fighting enemies isn't good. You couple that, well, first you take into account that this game has more of an RPG focus. You level these characters up to make them more powerful, unlock new abilities, which also brings with it, pretty much whenever you introduce a good amount of RPG focus, you tend to get enemies that end up taking more damage than they would if this was more of an action game. So even the low-tier street thugs can take quite a bit of a pounding before you fully put them down a lot of the time. And yeah, coupling that with the poor performance a lot of the time, and combat just doesn't feel good. You compare this to, once more, Arkham Knight, which also, keep in mind, on consoles, this was also capped to 30 frames per second. But it was a much smoother 30 frames per second, and you had the magnificent chef's kiss free flow combat, and it just, well, flows, for lack of a better word, a million times better. And also, there are some really, I would say, just straight up dumb decisions in terms of the combat design. Most notably, I would say, the fact that you can be attacked and take damage while performing takedowns. So just like in the Arkham games, the Spider-Man games as well, you can hit guys with these flashy takedowns that fully put them down. And once more, I do think there are some cool looking takedowns in this game. But the other enemies can still attack you and hurt you while you're in the middle of these animations that you cannot cancel out of. So it puts you in a very vulnerable position and makes you almost not want to use them because you're going to leave yourself open. There are also some really annoying enemies in this game, and there's a difference, okay, between an enemy being just tough to fight and straight up annoying. Tough enemies can still be fun to fight, but an annoying enemy is just that, it's annoying. The enemy drones in this game, jeez. There are baddies that will summon drones that fly around and shoot you from an elevated distance, as well as fly right at you to just self-destruct on top of you. They're tough to kill because when they're elevated in the air, you have to use your targeted ranged attacks, and that can be really odd to do when you're in the middle of, again, also fighting all these melee guys. And if you don't take out the guys summoning the drones, they just spam that shit all day. So you combine these two elements, being able to be attacked during the finishing animations with these annoying drones. And I mean, look at this clip where I'm fighting some of Mr. Freeze's goons. Watch my health in the lower left. I use a heal to put me at full health, then I hit this one guy with a takedown and just get lit the fuck up. Immediately blasted with a drone's ice beam. Then another comes over, detonates right on top of me, and before the thing finishes, I start getting hit by another ice beam. And so when the animation does finish, I instantly go into reacting from getting hit by that final ice beam and can't dodge out of the way or anything. It's just trash. Once more, there's a difference between a game being difficult and just frustrating. I still get through this fight fine, but it's just not fun to deal with this sort of stuff. I mean, almost half my health just Thanos snapped away, and there's nothing I could do about it except for, like I said, just choose not to do the takedown. And I recognize, in terms of some of this clunky combat, I do get that this is a co-op game. And it's not like you could do the same free-flow combat from the Arkham games. Two characters ping-ponging around like that probably wouldn't work very well, but you certainly could have done much better than this. And a big problem with the poor frame rate is that it affects so much more of the gameplay. Like I said, just getting around the city is rough. This combat, it makes it harder. But you got side activities like the Bat Cycle time trial courses that you're racing through the city super fast and it looks terrible. Now at this point, I know you guys are thinking, Shy, you said you had some fun with this, and this all sounds awful. And yeah, I'm trying to make it clear that this isn't a good game. But yes, I did have some fun with it. While the combat overall isn't good, I always enjoy running around Gotham fighting crime. Like I said at the top, there are some of us who hunger for this stuff so bad, just having that basic concept can get us to look past a lot of even major issues and still enjoy a game like this, especially with the addition of it being fully playable in co-op. I do not want to understate, once more, how many people I know have been dying for an experience like this, the full AAA open world superhero game where you can run around and explore, fight crime and all that with your friends. And I did have some fun doing that with other people. As I said, there are some cool moves. Each character does have unique abilities and are better suited for different situations. Jason Todd Red Hood is the one I played the most. He's more of a brute, even though he uses guns. He actually does, I thought this was awesome, a sort of gun kata thing for the 5 of you who have seen Equilibrium. Even though he uses guns, there is a BS lore excuse of them being non-lethal. I want to make sure everybody knows it. Kind of like the Batmobile guns in the Arkham Knights. Like, oh, this is non-lethal. Don't worry about it. Like, I don't know, Batman. That looked pretty lethal to me. Also, you're able to actually fight the police in this game. They just don't give you XP. The police overall basically don't trust you. There are times, you'll help them out and they'll be like, oh yeah, I knew you guys weren't so bad. But something I actually thought was really cool, a lot of the time with the crime missions that just randomly pop up around the city, shortly after you finish them, the police will show up. Even if it takes place inside a building, they'll roll up, full tactical SWAT gear and that, search the place, and if they find you, they will attack you and you can fight back. So it's like being able to have full-fledged shootouts with the police as Red Hood in a legit AAA Batman game is just one of those things I would have never expected. Maybe, someone could do that as a mod, or at the very most, maybe they could put that in like one of the challenge room type deals. They've done that where you play as villains and fight security and stuff like that in the Arkham games. But while playing even sometimes the main story missions, yeah, definitely not something I expected. And just sticking with my boy Jason for a bit more, he gets this really awesome super attack where it's like his guns get a Lazarus Pit enhanced effect where you can target a group of enemies. First, when you start charging it up, they all get feared. Then you unleash the shot and it bounces around, hits them all. Incredibly fun to use. Also, his air travel skill. Each character has a different ability that you unlock, allowing them to glide around Gotham. And his is this like Lazarus-powered air jump. So you're just jumping around in midair with this big green cloud effect coming out under you. Again, thought that was really cool looking. As I said, there are some cool aspects to the combat in terms of the skills. There are some cool animations, even if they're slow. Kind of random, but I did like with the combat being able to throw dudes off rooftops and not like a Spider-Man, oh, they got hit off the rooftop, but they're, grabbed on with some web and attached to the side of whatever. No, like you can grab thugs when you're fighting on the rooftops and just throw them off the side of the building and they splat. And with the characters playing differently, different ones, like I said, are suited better to different situations. Robin is better at sneaking. Batgirl can hack stuff. Nightwing goes so hard with his flips that just doing them near people can knock them back. And what's nice is they all level up together as you play. So even if you focus on one character, it's not like the others are just under-leveled and unusable. And you also, when you go out and do the missions and that, you can get gear for all of them as you're playing. So it is easy to switch between them whenever you feel like, which I thought was a solid design choice, especially for people who want to play through this single player. It's not like you're locked into one play style. And beyond that, there is a gear system. You can equip different armor, weapons in that. Gear your character out in certain ways. You can put like different types of effects on your weapons, like a freeze effect to freeze enemies after you hit them so much. A fire effect will make them catch on fire and they'll start losing health and, start freaking out and stuff like that. And as I touched on earlier, probably my favorite aspect of this game that any game like this from now on needs to continue replicating, and I will say this slowly to anyone perhaps working on one of these upcoming multiplayer RPG-focused superhero games, changing your character's gear actually changes your character's appearance. My God, this has been a huge pet peeve of mine in other similar superhero games that have gearing elements where the gear doesn't change your appearance. I can't stand it. In an RPG like this, where it's a big focus of it is going out and completing all these side missions and that, trying to grind for gear, I want to see that progression in my character. And you can further customize them. Like you equip a new suit, and then there's a separate section where each suit has multiple different options for cowls, gloves, boots, etc., as well as a ton of color options for each one. This aspect, I'd actually say they nailed. I mean, counter that with Marvel's Avengers, which makes you have to pay if you want different costumes. Which, in terms of giving this game some props, in comparison to the Avengers game, this is where I become a bit of a defender of Gotham Knights, because I disagree with what appears to be the majority opinion of people considering these titles fairly equal. I mean, from the review scores and that I've seen like on Metacritic, both in terms of the professional and user reviews, these titles are pretty close. And yeah, I totally disagree with that. I'd rather play Gotham Knights at 10 frames per second while being set on fire than play Marvel's Avengers. Maybe the combat was a bit less clunky in Avengers, but overall as a game, I mean, that game is literally, you just zone into a level and run forward in a straight line killing all the guys. I mean, there's nothing to that game, where at least here you've got the open world that you can freely run through and explore, drop in on random crimes happening across the city and stop them. To be clear, for those of you who may not have played the Avengers games, there's none of that in that game. It's literally you pick a level, you zone in, you fight all the guys, it ends, and then you go do another one, and that's it. Which also I think makes the multiplayer aspect of this game so much better. Again, not trying to say this is some great game, but being able to have a friend come in and run around the city with you, you don't even have to really like stay close together. You can actually go off a bit on your own. You can't like zone in to a place separately, like if it's a story mission or something like that. But you could each kind of go tackle different crimes happening on the streets if you wanted to. And also this game does have much more, incredibly much more gameplay variety than Marvel's Avengers. There are the stealth sections, solving puzzles, investigating the crime scenes, all that good stuff. Like, at least this is an actual fleshed out game. Not a super high bar, but I think, again, far superior to Avengers, which is, once more, zone into a level. There aren't even that many different levels in that game, and you run around, hit all the guys, and it's over. So yeah, as a game, I think this is a much bigger step in the right direction than Avengers was. The only thing I think helps the Avengers game is that it had the big names. Your Iron Man, Hulk, Captain America, Thor, etc. Which, in terms of that, let's talk a bit about this story here. You've got, again, a super dead Batman. The Bat Fam takes over for him. The investigation into his death obviously ties into Ra's al Ghul's League of Shadows, but also the Court of Owls, which I got to admit, I'm a bit of a fanboy of them as well. The Court of Owls storyline was one of the few newer comic storylines that I really liked, which is kind of sad, actually, because that storyline's already like a decade plus old, something like that. But they're a literal underground secret society of elites in Gotham that have been actually pulling many of the strings in the shadows for basically forever throughout the city's history. And I did like a lot of the sections with them. Their hideouts, as I said, there are some cool interior areas in this game. They've got a lot of the puzzle solving in there, which does break up the gameplay nicely. But in terms of the actual story implementation, I didn't think any of the main stuff was done particularly well. I think a big problem with this game's main story is that you can see much of it, the ending certainly, coming from a mile away. I'm sure many of you, even if you just have basic understanding of Batman lore, certainly if you've played the Arkham games, when you hear Dead Batman and Ra's al Ghul, you probably know where things are going. Also, with the multiple playable characters deal, I can see their hands were probably tied a bit. Like, you have to be able to play through any section of the game as any of the characters and have the cutscenes and everything make sense. So they probably couldn't make things too crazy and intricate in that regard. But still, I didn't think the story was very interesting. As I said, the twists and turns, a lot of it you can see coming from a mile away, and still some cool moments, just nothing to write home about. The best aspects of the story, in my opinion, were the little bits that you'd get back at the team's HQ. Here you have optional cinematics that you view by interacting with the environment, which if you play this game, I highly recommend you do. And you do have to make sure when you're back at the base to switch between the characters to see which new cutscenes are available, because you have to be playing the right character to start the right cutscene. But I did think seeing the characters deal with their individual inner turmoil over Batman's death and having them comfort each other in their own ways was done really well. Once more here, I think a problem with the main story is you see everything when out on patrol through one character's lens. Like, in terms of the story, when you're out doing stuff, it's like one character is out there and everybody else is back at base. So in terms of the main story, doing the missions and that, you don't get to really see them interact. Again, I could see how that could be an issue if you were trying to make different cutscenes with all the different pairings of characters, but yeah, it hurts. But for that reason, I think a lot of the stuff just chilling back at the base actually was a lot more interesting. And so it kind of feels to me in terms of the main story that they didn't have many ideas for this beyond, we're doing a co-op Batman game with the Bat Kids, and that's simply not enough if you're going to go this route. As I see it, the core issue really with all of this is that this whole Batman game without Batman concept, while I think it's actually a cool idea, I like the comic stories where the Bat Kids, the proteges, have to work together without Batman. But when it comes to doing something big, whether it be, say, a feature film, or in this case, a major AAA game, Batman is obviously what sells. Batman vs. Joker sells. There's a reason the entire Arkham trilogy was about Batman vs. Joker. Even when, spoiler alert, Joker died, they still managed to make it about Batman vs. Joker. Because people see that duo, and immediately they're just drawn in. So if you're going to go this route, go with the less notable names across the board, really, both in terms of the heroes and the villains. If you're going to do that, you really got to nail it. You have to hit it clear out of the park for people to look past the idea, again, of a Batman game without Batman. I think it can be done, but you're not going to do it with a game like this, which is the reason I want to make it so clear that I think the bones are here for something awesome. I don't want games like this to fail, perhaps also the upcoming Suicide Squad game Kill the Justice League, I think it's called, which I don't know too much about, but I know it's also co-op game, I believe 4-player co-op. At least in that game's case, you're going after the Justice League, so at least they'll be able to feature the big characters in that way. But yeah, I wouldn't want these games to fail, and the takeaway from decision makers greenlighting all these games being like, oh, I guess players just aren't interested in a big co-op superhero experience, because I think there is definitely a market for it. As I said, with all the problems in this game, I did manage to have some fun with it, and I'll even say it felt a bit special running along those rooftops with other players and dropping in and taking out criminals and stuff like that as a team. I definitely want that in a game better than this. And obviously, to the more cultured among you, when we're talking about co-op superhero games, you might be talking about stuff like Ultimate Alliance 3, which, yes, is way better than both Gotham Knights and Avengers. But that's more of an arcadey type deal. I think this, a more AAA feeling open world type game, can not only work, but it's something I believe people really want, but it's got to be executed better. In terms of you hardcore Arkham fans thinking maybe you can get past a lot of this stuff and fully enjoy the game, especially if you have a buddy that you'd want to play through it with, I'd still recommend that you at least hold off to see if there are improvements to the performance. I don't think you necessarily need a full-on 60 FPS mode, I doubt that it would even come at this point, but they at least need to make that 30 FPS a stable 30 FPS. And even at that point, and I do want to mention the team has said that there are patches they're going to be rolling out to address many of these various issues, such as the game's poor performance, but we hear these types of things all the time. We'll have to wait and see how much of these issues they end up actually fixing. And the longer you wait, like I said, the just more discounted this game's going to be anyway. But I would still say, even if those improvements do come, certainly do not pay $70 for this game. I would not be surprised to see this game on sale as soon as Black Friday, and I wouldn't pay more than like $20 or $30. And that is, again, if they improve on that performance. But yeah, if they do that, if they make the game at least run better and it gets a heavy price cut, I could see this game being worth a playthrough for, again, these hardcore Arkham or just general Batman fans. But beyond that, if you're not like super into Batman, I just don't see it happening. Anyway, with that, this video is a wrap. Let me know your thoughts on Gotham Knights in the comments. Are you currently playing the game? Are you enjoying it? Were you interested in it before you heard about how bad it was? And are you hoping we can get a solid open world co-op superhero game like this one day that's actually good? As always, I'm the Shy Guy, Johnny Zakari, and thanks for watching.